I paid for my husband's degree, but he graduated and kicked me out. You're too ugly for my new life. Homeless, I went to a shelter. When I saw bullies mocking an Arab girl for not speaking English, I confronted them and whispered in perfect Arabic, "I'm with you, sweetheart." Next day, a Bugatti and 7 SUVs blocked the street. A sheikh stepped out, saw his daughter with me, and fell to his knees. What he said: "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached." I never thought 28 years of marriage would end with me staring at a cardboard suitcase on the sidewalk. But there I was, 62 years old, and homeless. You're too ugly for my new life. Marcus's words still echoed in my ears as I sat on the concrete steps of our house. Well, his house now. The house I'd helped pay for while he pursued his law degree. The house where I'd cooked dinner every night for nearly 3 decades, while working double shifts at the hospital cafeteria. My hands trembled as I touched the small scar on my palm, a reminder of the day I'd cut myself opening a can of soup because I was too exhausted to focus properly. That was during his 2nd year of law school, when I was working 16-hour days to keep us afloat. I remember thinking then that the sacrifice would be worth it. We were building something together. How naive I'd been. The morning had started like any other. I woke up at 5:30, made coffee in the kitchen where sunlight used to stream through yellow curtains I'd sewn myself. The smell of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the faint scent of the lavender I grew in our small garden. I hummed quietly, not wanting to wake Marcus, who had graduated 3 months ago and was now working at Preston and Associates downtown. I'd been so proud of him. So proud of us. Letitia. His voice cut through my morning routine like a blade. I turned, expecting his usual peck on the cheek before work, but his face was cold, distant, like he was looking at a stranger. "We need to talk." I set down my coffee mug, the one he'd given me for our 10th anniversary that said, "World's Best Wife." My stomach clenched with a familiar anxiety I'd learned to ignore over the years. "What's wrong?" I asked, though part of me already knew. He'd been different since graduation, distant, critical. He'd started commenting on my appearance, suggesting I update my look, whatever that meant. Marcus straightened his tie, a gesture I'd seen him practice in the mirror lately. Everything about him was different now. Sharper, more polished. He'd even changed his cologne to something expensive that made my eyes water. "This isn't working anymore," he said, not even looking at me. "I've consulted with a lawyer. Divorce papers are being filed today." The words hit me like a physical blow. I gripped the kitchen counter, my legs suddenly unsteady. "Marcus, what are you saying? We can work through whatever's wrong. We always have." He laughed then, a sound I'd never heard from him before. Cold and bitter. "Work through what exactly? The fact that you're holding me back? That every time I introduce you to my colleagues, I'm embarrassed?" "Embarrassed?" The word came out as a whisper. "Look at yourself, Letitia. Really look." His eyes swept over me with disgust. "You're 62 years old. You dress like my grandmother, and you smell like cafeteria grease. I'm a partner track attorney now. I need someone who fits that life." Each word was carefully chosen to wound. I could see it in his eyes. This wasn't an emotional outburst. This was calculated. "I paid for your education," I said, my voice gaining strength. "I worked myself to the bone so you could have this career. $215,000, Marcus. I have the receipts. And I'm grateful for that investment," he said, adjusting his cufflinks. "But that doesn't mean I owe you a lifetime of embarrassment. You'll get what the law requires, nothing more." The law. He was already thinking like an attorney, calculating his exposure, minimizing his losses. "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. "That's not my problem anymore. You have until noon to pack your things. I've already changed the locks for tonight." I stared at him, this man I'd loved for almost 3 decades, the man I'd held when his father died, The man I'd encouraged through law school when he wanted to quit. The man who used to tell me I was beautiful, even when I came home exhausted and covered in food stains. You're serious. Dead serious. And Letitia? He paused at the kitchen doorway. Don't expect this to be like the movies where I realize I've made a mistake. I haven't. This is the best decision I've ever made. The sound of the door closing behind him echoed through the house like a gunshot. I stood there for what felt like hours, staring at the kitchen where we'd shared thousands of meals, where I'd helped him study for the bar exam just 6 months ago. The morning light that used to feel warm now seemed harsh and unforgiving. My reflection in the kitchen window showed a woman I barely recognized. When had the lines around my eyes become so deep? When had my hair become so gray? When had I become invisible, even to myself? I packed mechanically, my movements robotic. 28 years of life fit into 2 cardboard boxes and a suitcase I'd bought at Goodwill years ago. I left behind photo albums, wedding china, and all the dreams I'd built in this house. None of it belonged to me anymore. The hardest part was walking past his diploma hanging in the hallway. Marcus Williams, Juris Doctor, University of Colorado Law School. Below it was a photo of his graduation day, me beaming beside him in my best dress, the one I'd worn to every important occasion because I couldn't afford more. I'd been so proud that day, so hopeful about our future. The Sacred Heart shelter smelled like industrial disinfectant and desperation. Sister Margaret, a thin woman with kind eyes and calloused hands, processed my intake with practiced efficiency. "How long were you married, dear?" she asked gently, not looking up from her paperwork. 28 years. She paused, her pen hovering over the form. "I'm sorry. That must be very difficult." I nodded, not trusting my voice. Around us, the fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered, casting harsh shadows on the beige walls. Women of various ages sat on plastic chairs, their faces wearing the same shell-shocked expression I imagined was on my own. "Do you have any family who could help?" Sister Margaret continued. No family. Marcus had been my family. His rejection felt like being orphaned all over again. My assigned bed was in a room with 5 other women. The mattress was thin, the blanket scratchy, but it was clean. That night I lay awake listening to quiet sobbing from the bed next to mine, staring at a ceiling stained with water damage that looked like a map of broken dreams. I thought about the garden I'd left behind, wondering if Marcus would remember to water the lavender. Probably not. He'd never cared about the things I loved. I wondered if he was already with someone else, someone younger and prettier who wouldn't embarrass him at firm parties. The thought made my chest ache with a pain so intense I had to press my hand against my heart to make sure it was still beating. At 62, I was starting over with $3,200 in savings and a broken spirit. I'd given the best years of my life to a man who threw me away like yesterday's newspaper the moment I was no longer useful. But as I lay there in that shelter bed, something small and stubborn inside me refused to break completely. I wasn't dead yet. And maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of my story. The woman in the next bed had stopped crying. In the quiet darkness, I whispered a prayer I hadn't said since childhood, asking for strength to face whatever came next. I had no idea that tomorrow would bring an encounter that would change everything. All I knew was that I had survived the worst day of my life. Tomorrow, I would survive too. 3 weeks at Sacred Heart had taught me the rhythm of survival. Wake at 6 when Sister Margaret rang the morning bell, shower quickly before the hot water ran out. Stand in line for watery oatmeal and burned coffee. Pretend to look for work while my pride slowly dissolved like sugar in rain. I was sitting in the courtyard on a Tuesday morning, watching pigeons fight over breadcrumbs when I first saw her. She couldn't have been more than 16, maybe 17 at most. While the other residents wore the defeated slouch of people who'd given up, this girl sat perfectly straight on the concrete bench, her back rigid with something that wasn't quite pride, but wasn't submission either. Her dark hair was covered by a simple navy hijab, and her clothes, though clearly from donation bins, were arranged with care. But it was her eyes that stopped me cold. They held the same expression I'd been seeing in mirrors lately, the look of someone whose world had been ripped away without warning. "Fresh meat," I heard Janet mutter from behind me. Janet was 43, had been in and out of shelters for years, and had appointed herself unofficial welcome committee for new residents. Bet she don't last a week. The girl sat alone, untouched breakfast tray beside her, staring at something only she could see. I recognized that 1,000-yard stare. I'd been wearing it myself lately. Over the next few days, I watched her navigate the unspoken rules of shelter life. She kept to herself, spoke only when directly addressed, and somehow managed to maintain a dignity that this place seemed designed to strip away. The other residents mostly ignored her, but I noticed the way some of the younger women looked at her hijab with poorly concealed hostility. It was bound to happen eventually. Thursday afternoon, I was coming back from my pointless job search when I heard voices from the courtyard. Not conversation, the kind of voices that made your stomach clench with recognition. "Why don't you go back where you came from?" Melissa's voice was loud, designed to draw an audience. She was 19, pregnant, and had been channeling her own fear and anger onto anyone who seemed like an easier target than her actual problems. I quickened my pace. "Can't even speak English properly," Melissa continued. Her two friends flanked her like a pack hunting something wounded. Probably taking benefits from real Americans. The girl stood perfectly still in the center of their circle, her hands clasped in front of her, chin raised. She was frightened. I could see it in the tight set of her shoulders, but she wasn't cowering. I said, "Why don't you answer me?" Melissa stepped closer, and I saw her hand move toward the girl's hijab. "What are you hiding under there?" That's when I moved. "Step away from her." My voice carried across the courtyard with an authority I hadn't felt in months. Melissa's hand froze mid-reach. "This ain't your business, old lady," Melissa said, but she took a half step back. I walked into their circle, placing myself between them and the girl. "Actually, it is my business. We're all guests here, and guests treat each other with respect." "She can't even talk to us," one of Melissa's friends complained. I turned to look at the girl directly. Her dark eyes met mine, and I saw something there that made my chest tight. Fear, yes, but also a desperate hope that someone, anyone, might understand. Without thinking, words came out of my mouth that I hadn't spoken in over 20 years. "Ana ma'aki, habibti, latakafi." "I'm with you, sweetheart. Don't be afraid." The girl's eyes went wide with shock. Around us, the courtyard fell completely silent. "Shukran," she whispered back, her voice thick with tears. "Thank you." Melissa and her friends stared at us like we'd just performed magic, which, in a way, we had. "What the hell was that?" Melissa demanded. "Arabic," I said calmly, not taking my eyes off the girl. "And if you have a problem with that, you can take it up with Sister Margaret." They scattered like roaches when the lights come on. The girl and I stood alone in the courtyard, the weight of connection hanging between us like a bridge neither of us had expected to find. "Your Arabic is very good," she said softly in English, her accent musical but careful. "Where did you learn?" It was a question I hadn't answered honestly in decades. The scar on my palm seemed to throb with old memories. "That's a long story," I said. "What's your name?" "Amira." She pronounced it with the careful precision of someone used to having their name mispronounced. "Beautiful name. It means princess, doesn't it?" She blinked in surprise. "Yes. You know Arabic names?" I nodded. "I know a lot of things I don't talk about. Come on, let's go inside. It's getting cold." As we walked toward the building, Amira stayed close to my side, like a child seeking protection. It stirred something in me I thought had died with my marriage, the urge to shield someone from harm. "Why did you help me?" she asked as we reached the door. I paused, my hand on the handle. How could I explain that in her frightened eyes, I saw myself at 16, alone in a foreign country with no one to protect me? How could I tell her that helping her felt like saving a piece of myself that I'd thought was lost forever? Because everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, I said instead. And because you remind me of someone I used to know. That evening, we sat together in the common room. Amira had saved half her dinner roll to share with me, a gesture that nearly broke my heart. We talked quietly in a mixture of English and Arabic, her tension gradually easing as she realized I wasn't going to ask the questions that clearly terrified her. She told me she was from Colorado, born here, but her family had moved around a lot when she was younger. She didn't mention why she was at the shelter, and I didn't push. I recognized the carefully edited version of truth. I'd been telling my own version for 3 weeks, but I noticed things. The way she automatically covered certain parts of her body when men walked by. The careful way she ate, like someone trained in formal etiquette. The small gold ring on her right hand that she twisted constantly, not cheap jewelry, despite its simple appearance. Most telling was the way she flinched whenever doors slammed or voices were raised. This girl had been through something that went beyond normal teenage rebellion. "Do you have children?" She asked me suddenly. The question hit like a physical blow. Marcus and I had tried for years. 3 miscarriages, thousands of dollars in treatments, hope dying a little more each month. Eventually, we'd stopped trying. Marcus said it was God's will. I'd wondered if it was punishment for some sin I couldn't identify. "No," I said simply. Amira nodded like she understood something I hadn't said. "I think you would have been a good mother." The unexpected kindness brought tears to my eyes. This child, dealing with her own enormous problems, was comforting me. "What makes you say that?" I managed. "Because you stood up for me. Because you speak to me like I matter." She paused, twisting the ring on her finger. "My own family doesn't do that." There it was, the first crack in her careful facade. I wanted to ask more, to understand what had brought this obviously educated, well-mannered girl to a homeless shelter, but I recognized the signs of someone who'd already revealed more than they'd intended. "Well," I said carefully, "I'm glad we found each other." That night, I lay in my narrow bed thinking about the day. For the first time since Marcus threw me out, I'd felt useful, needed. The Arabic had flowed from my lips like it had been waiting 20 years to be spoken again. I thought about Damascus, about the family who'd taken in a frightened American teenager decades ago, about the woman who'd taught me that kindness transcends language and culture, about lessons learned in a world that seemed very far from this shelter in Denver. Amira was asleep in the bed across from mine, her breathing soft and even. In the dim light from the hallway, she looked even younger, vulnerable in a way that made my heart ache. I didn't know her story yet, but I recognized the signs. This girl was running from something that had enough power to make her choose a homeless shelter over going home. Whatever it was, she wasn't facing it alone anymore. Tomorrow, I would start learning just how dangerous her secrets really were. The first sign something was wrong came on a Friday morning when I noticed the black sedan. It was parked across the street from Sacred Heart, windows tinted so dark you couldn't see inside. Not unusual in this neighborhood, except for one thing. It was clean. Spotless. In an area where even the police cars collected dust and grime within hours, this car looked like it had just rolled off a dealership lot. I mentioned it to Sister Margaret during our morning coffee in her small office behind the kitchen. "Probably belongs to one of the social workers," she said, not looking up from the stack of intake forms she was reviewing. "They've been doing more wellness checks lately." But I'd worked in institutions long enough to recognize the difference between official business and something else. Social workers drove dented sedans with coffee stains and fast food wrappers. They didn't drive cars that cost more than most people made in a year. The second sign came that afternoon when Amira didn't show up for lunch. She'd been eating regularly since I'd started sitting with her. even managing small smiles when I shared stories about my disastrous attempts to learn Arabic cooking from YouTube videos. But her seat in the cafeteria remained empty, her usual spot by the window vacant. I found her in our shared room, sitting on her narrow bed with her back pressed against the wall. Her hands shook as she twisted that small gold ring around her finger in rapid, nervous circles. "Habibti, what's wrong?" I asked, using the Arabic endearment that had become natural between us. She looked up, and I saw fear so raw it made my stomach clench. Real fear, not the general anxiety that hung over everyone in this place like a fog. "There are men outside," she whispered. "They've been there since morning." "What men?" "I can't explain. I know they're looking for me." I sat down on my own bed, facing her. "Amira, what aren't you telling me? Who would be looking for you?" She was quiet for so long I thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "My family is complicated." "Complicated how?" Another long pause. She pulled her knees to her chest, making herself as small as possible. "My father is an important man. He has rules about how his daughters should live." The way she said "important" sent a chill down my spine. In my experience, truly important people didn't send men in expensive cars to hang around homeless shelters. Unless they were looking for someone who didn't want to be found. "What kind of rules?" I asked gently. Amira's laugh was bitter, far too old for her 16 years. "The kind where I don't get to choose who I marry, or when, or where I live for the rest of my life. Arranged marriage." The pieces started clicking into place. Her formal manners, her perfect posture, the way she ate like someone trained in etiquette. The expensive ring she wore on her right hand that I'd initially dismissed as costume jewelry. "You ran away," I said. It wasn't a question. She nodded, tears starting to fall. 3 months ago. I was supposed to. There was a ceremony planned. A wedding to a man I'd never met. Someone my father chose to strengthen business connections. My heart broke for her. 16 years old and already being bartered away like a commodity. "Where have you been for 3 months?" "Different places. Friends' houses until their parents found out and got scared. A few other shelters in other cities. But they always find me eventually." She wiped her nose with the back of her hand. "I thought maybe here, in a place like this, they wouldn't think to look. But they did. They always do. My father has. Resources." Resources. Another carefully chosen word that spoke volumes. I stood up and moved to the small window that faced the street. The black sedan was still there, and now I could make out the shape of at least one person in the driver's seat. As I watched, a second car, this one a dark blue SUV, pulled up behind it. "Amira," I said carefully, "exactly how important is your father?" She was quiet for a moment. When she answered, her voice was small and scared. "Important enough that when he wants something found, it gets found." The implications hit me like a sledgehammer. This wasn't some garden variety family dysfunction. This was a girl from a powerful family who'd chosen homelessness over whatever life her father had planned for her. "We need to tell Sister Margaret," I said. "No." The panic in Amira's voice was immediate and sharp. "Please, Letitia, you don't understand. If they take me back now, the man I was supposed to marry, he's older than my father. He already has 2 wives. I would disappear into his house and never be seen again." I'd heard stories like this during my time in the Middle East, though I'd hoped they were exaggerations. Looking at Amira's terrified face, I realized they weren't. "Then what do you want to do?" "I don't know." She buried her face in her hands. "I just know I can't go back." That evening, I positioned myself in the common room where I could see the street through the front windows. The black sedan had been joined by the blue SUV and now a white pickup truck. 3 vehicles, all with tinted windows, all maintaining a distance that suggested surveillance rather than preparation for immediate action. They were watching. waiting for something. Janet plopped down beside me on the donated couch, following my gaze out the window. "Fancy cars for this neighborhood," she observed. "You think they're cops?" "I don't think so." "Immigration, maybe? That little Arab girl been acting real jumpy lately." I shot her a sharp look. "Her name is Amira, and she was born here." Janet shrugged. "Whatever. Just saying, she's got that look. You know the one, like she's expecting bad news." Unfortunately, Janet wasn't wrong. Amira did have that look. The question was whether the bad news was already here or just getting ready to arrive. Over the next 2 days, the surveillance continued. The cars rotated. Different vehicles, but always 3 of them. Always positioned to cover all the exits from Sacred Heart. Professional. Patient. I started paying attention to details I'd been too focused on my own problems to notice before. The way Amira never used the front entrance, always coming and going through the side door that led to the alley. How she kept her hijab pulled low and moved through crowds with the practiced invisibility of someone who'd been hiding for months. And the ring. That small, seemingly simple gold band that she never took off, not even to shower. I'd caught glimpses of it when she thought no one was looking, and I was beginning to suspect it wasn't as simple as it appeared. On Sunday evening, we were sitting together in the courtyard when Amira finally showed it to me properly. "This was my grandmother's," she said, sliding it off her finger and placing it in my palm. The moment I held it, I knew I'd been wrong about everything. The gold was heavier than it looked, and carved into the band in tiny, precise script was Arabic calligraphy. Not just any Arabic, the kind of formal classical script used for official documents and royal seals. "What does it say?" I asked, though part of me was beginning to guess. "It's our family name, and a title that goes back many generations." She took the ring back, her fingers trembling slightly. "My grandmother gave it to me before she died. She said it would protect me if I ever needed to prove who I was." "And who exactly are you, Amira?" She looked at me for a long moment, seeming to weigh how much truth she could trust me with. Finally, she whispered, "My father is Sheikh Rashid al-Mansouri. He controls oil rights across 3 countries and has business relationships with governments around the world." The courtyard seemed to spin around me. Sheikh, not just wealthy, actual royalty. No wonder the surveillance outside looked professional. No wonder she'd been hiding in homeless shelters rather than going to the police or social services. "And you ran away from him." "I ran away from the life he planned for me. The marriage he arranged. The future where I would be property passed from one man to another." Her voice gained strength as she spoke. "I know it sounds ungrateful. I know I was raised with privileges most people never have, but I want to choose my own path." I understood now why she looked so young and yet carried herself with such dignity. She'd been trained from birth to be a princess, but she'd chosen to be a refugee rather than accept a crown that came with chains. "Those men outside," I said, "they're not going to give up, are they?" "No. And eventually, they'll realize I'm here, when that happens." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. In my 62 years, I'd made plenty of mistakes, but I'd never been responsible for someone else's life. Amira had trusted me with a secret that could destroy her chances of freedom forever. The men outside weren't going away. If anything, they'd probably call in more resources soon. And when they did, this shelter full of vulnerable women would become a battlefield. I thought about my own situation. Homeless, broke, with no family or connections to speak of. What could I possibly do to help someone being hunted by international wealth and power? But as I listened to Amira's quiet breathing across the room, I knew I was going to try anyway. This brave girl had chosen dignity over comfort, freedom over luxury. She deserved someone in her corner, even if that someone was just a discarded wife with nothing left to lose. Tomorrow, I would start figuring out how to protect a runaway princess from her own family. The question wasn't whether I had the resources to help her. The question was whether I had the courage to try. Tuesday morning changed everything. I woke at 5:30 to the sound of engines. Not the usual traffic noise from the street, but the deep, synchronized rumble of multiple large vehicles arriving simultaneously. Through our small window, I could see shapes moving in the pre-dawn darkness. More cars than had been there the night before. Amira was already awake, sitting up in her bed with her knees drawn to her chest. In the dim light, her face was pale with terror. "They're here," she whispered. "Really here this time." I moved to the window and peered through the blinds. What I saw made my blood run cold. 6 vehicles now surrounded Sacred Heart. Not just cars, but SUVs with tinted windows, and at least one that looked like it could withstand a rocket attack. Men in dark suits stood beside each vehicle, their postures alert and professional. This wasn't surveillance anymore. This was preparation for action. "How many people know you're here?" I asked, keeping my voice low. "No one. I've been so careful." But even as she said it, doubt crept into her voice. Unless someone saw me and recognized me. Or maybe they have photos from security cameras. She was probably right about the cameras. In today's world, a 16-year-old girl couldn't stay hidden forever, especially not one whose father had the resources of a small country at his disposal. "Get dressed," I told her, quickly. "Where can I go? They're everywhere." I was pulling on my clothes, my mind racing through possibilities. The shelter had back exits, but professional security teams would have those covered too. And even if we could get out of the building, where could we go that they wouldn't find us within hours? "The basement," I said suddenly. "Sister Margaret showed me the old storm shelter when I first arrived. It connects to the church next door through an old tunnel." Amira was already moving, grabbing her few possessions and stuffing them into a small backpack. Her movements were quick and efficient. She'd done this before. We made it halfway down the hall before the front doors opened. The sound echoed through the building like gunshots. Not violent, but absolutely authoritative. These men weren't breaking in. They were announcing their arrival. "Everyone remain calm," a voice called out in accented English, authoritative, educated, used to being obeyed. "We are looking for someone specific. No one else will be disturbed." Sister Margaret's voice responded, tight with controlled anger. "This is a shelter for homeless women. You cannot just—" "We have legal authority," the man interrupted. "Here are our papers." I grabbed Amira's arm and pulled her into the stairwell that led to the basement. We could hear footsteps above us, voices giving orders in what sounded like Arabic, the systematic sound of doors being opened and closed. The basement was dark and smelled of mildew and old concrete. I fumbled for the light switch, found it, and led Amira toward the far corner where Sister Margaret had shown me the entrance to the old tunnel. "Letitia," Amira whispered, and I turned to see tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry I brought this to you, to everyone here." "Don't apologize for wanting freedom," I told her firmly. "That's not something you should ever have to be sorry for." The tunnel entrance was hidden behind a stack of old Christmas decorations and donated furniture that hadn't been distributed yet. As I started moving boxes, we heard footsteps on the stairs above us. They were being thorough. "I need to tell you something," Amira said urgently as I cleared the last obstruction from the tunnel entrance. "About my family. About what this really means. Tell me later. Right now we need to move." "No, now. In case something happens." She grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "My father isn't just wealthy, Letitia. He's politically connected across the Middle East and North Africa. Oil, yes, but also arms dealing, government contracts, things that governments protect." The implications hit me like a physical blow. "You're telling me your father is connected to people who make problems disappear, yes." Her voice was steady despite her tears. "If they take me back, I won't just lose my freedom. I'll lose my life eventually. The man I was supposed to marry, He's killed 2 wives already. Everyone knows it, but no one talks about it because he's too powerful to touch. The footsteps above us had reached the basement level. Why didn't you go to the FBI, to the authorities? Amira's laugh was bitter. With what proof? And how do I know which authorities aren't already being paid by my father or his allies? There's too much money involved, too many international relationships. A beam of flashlight light swept across the basement floor, getting closer to our corner. The tunnel entrance was barely big enough for one person at a time. I pushed Amira toward it. Go, I'll be right behind you. But as she started to crawl through, we heard voices directly above us. Arabic, spoken in rapid, urgent tones, then footsteps heading toward the stairs. They know we're down here, Amira whispered. I made a decision that surprised even me. Keep going, I'll delay them. Letitia, no. They won't hurt you, but they won't hesitate to. They won't hurt a 62-year-old American woman in a homeless shelter. Too much international attention. I hoped I was right about that. But you need time to get away. I can't leave you. Yes, you can, and you will, because that's what daughters do when their mothers tell them to run. The word hung between us for a moment. Daughters? Mothers. It was the first time either of us had acknowledged what had grown between us over these past weeks. Amira's eyes filled with fresh tears, but she nodded. Thank you, Mama Letitia. Then she was gone, disappearing into the tunnel just as the basement door opened fully, and 3 men in expensive suits started down the stairs. I stood up slowly, brushing dust off my clothes, and walked toward them with my hands visible. No point in hiding. They'd already seen me. Good morning, I said calmly. Can I help you, gentlemen? The leader was tall, probably in his 40s, with the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. His English was perfect. His suit probably cost more than I'd made in 6 months at the cafeteria. We are looking for a young woman, he said politely. She may be using the name Amira. Perhaps you have seen her? I met his gaze steadily. There are a lot of young women here. This is a shelter. This particular young woman would be of Middle Eastern heritage, approximately 16 years old. She may be wearing traditional head covering. That describes several residents, I said, which was true. Why are you looking for her? His smile was practiced, professional. She is a member of our employer's family. They are concerned for her welfare. And your employer is? A prominent businessman with interests in international commerce. The young woman has been missing for several months. Her family is very worried. I nodded thoughtfully. Well, if I see anyone matching that description, I'll be sure to let Sister Margaret know you're looking for her. I'm sure she can help you with the proper procedures for family reunification. Something flickered in his eyes. Irritation, maybe, at my refusal to be intimidated. He gestured to one of his companions who produced a photograph. It was Amira, but not the frightened girl I'd come to know. In this picture, she was dressed in formal robes, jewelry glittering at her throat and wrists, standing beside a man in traditional dress who had the same dark eyes and strong jawline. Her father, Sheikh Rashid al-Mansouri. Perhaps this will refresh your memory, the leader said. I studied the photograph carefully, then handed it back. She's very beautiful. But I'm afraid I haven't seen her here. It was a lie, of course. But looking at that photo, at the wealth and power surrounding Amira, at the formal poses that spoke of a life where every movement was controlled and observed, I felt more certain than ever that I was doing the right thing. Mrs. He was asking for my name. Williams. Letitia Williams. He made a note in a small leather book. Mrs. Williams, I hope you understand the seriousness of this situation. This young woman is in great danger. There are people who would harm her to get to her family. We are here to protect her. I understand that families worry, I said carefully. But if this young woman is in danger, Shouldn't the police be handling this instead of private security? His smile became strained. This is a delicate family matter with international implications. Sometimes private resolution is preferable to public attention. Translation. They wanted to handle this quietly, without media scrutiny or government oversight, which meant they probably weren't planning to take Amira home for a family reunion. Well, I said, I hope you find what you're looking for. If you'll excuse me, I should get upstairs for breakfast. I started toward the stairs, but he stepped into my path. Mrs. Williams, if you were to remember seeing this young woman, there would be a substantial reward. $25,000 in cash, no questions asked. $25,000. More money than I'd seen since Marcus and I were married. Enough to get me out of this shelter, into an apartment, maybe even a small house. That's very generous, I said. But like I told you, I haven't seen her. He studied my face for a long moment, then stepped aside. Of course. But please, keep the offer in mind. Family reunification is our only concern. I climbed the stairs on shaking legs, very aware that all three men were watching me go. In the main hallway, I could see other residents being questioned, some looking confused, others frightened by the sudden invasion of authority. Sister Margaret caught my eye from across the room and gave me a questioning look. I shook my head slightly. Not now, not with so many eyes watching. By the time the men left an hour later, I was reasonably confident that Amira had made it safely through the tunnel and into the church next door. But I also knew this wasn't over. They'd be watching the shelter now, probably monitoring everyone who came and went. And they knew my name. That evening, I sat alone in the courtyard, thinking about the choice I'd made. I could have taken the money. I could have told them about the tunnel, about Amira's hiding place. $25,000 would have solved all my immediate problems. Instead, I'd chosen to protect a girl who'd become like a daughter to me in just a few weeks. A girl whose own family was hunting her like an animal. As the sun set behind the city skyline, I wondered if I'd ever see Amira again. And if I did, whether we'd both live to regret the choice I'd made today. I didn't sleep for 3 days. Every footstep in the hallway, every car door slamming outside, every unexpected noise made my heart race. The men in suits hadn't returned, but I knew they were watching. I could feel their presence like a weight pressing down on the entire shelter. Sister Margaret had noticed something was wrong but hadn't pressed me for details. That was her way. She understood that some secrets were too dangerous to share, even with people you trusted. On Friday morning, everything changed again. I was in the kitchen helping prepare breakfast when Jenny, one of the newer residents, burst through the doors with her eyes wide with excitement. "You guys have got to see this," she said, slightly out of breath. "There's like 20 cars outside. Fancy ones. And men in suits everywhere." My blood turned to ice. "What kind of cars?" "Black ones, SUVs mostly. And there's this huge white limousine that looks like something a president would ride in." She peered through the small kitchen window. "Oh my God, there's a red carpet being rolled out." Red carpet. This wasn't a search operation anymore. This was an official arrival. I abandoned the oatmeal I'd been stirring and moved to the window. What I saw made my knees weak. The street in front of Sacred Heart had been transformed. Black SUVs formed a protective perimeter around a gleaming white Bentley limousine that probably cost more than most houses. Men in dark suits stood at precise intervals, their eyes constantly scanning for threats. And yes, someone was actually rolling out a red carpet from the limousine to the shelter's front door. "What the hell is happening?" Jenny whispered. I couldn't answer. My mouth had gone completely dry. The limousine's rear door opened, and a man stepped out who commanded attention without saying a word. Tall, probably in his 50s, with silver threading through his dark hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to absolute authority. He wore traditional Middle Eastern robes that were clearly custom-made, and even from this distance, I could see jewelry that caught the morning sunlight. Sheikh Rashid al-Mansouri, Amira's father. And he was here personally. Jenny, I said quietly, go tell Sister Margaret that we have important visitors. Very important. As Jenny scurried away, I watched the Sheikh's entrance. He didn't hurry, didn't look around nervously like his advance team had. He walked with the confidence of a man who owned everything he could see and expected the world to arrange itself around his convenience. Behind him came two more men in business suits and a woman in an elegant black abaya, who moved with the Sheikh's same regal bearing. Family members, perhaps, or trusted advisors. The procession disappeared into the building, and within minutes, I could hear Sister Margaret's voice in the main hall, trying to maintain control of a situation that had spiraled far beyond normal shelter operations. "Your Excellency," she was saying, her voice tight with the strain of being polite to someone who was clearly disrupting her facility. "While I appreciate your concern for this young woman, we have procedures." "I am not concerned with your procedures." The Sheikh's voice carried easily through the building, deep, accented, and completely inflexible. "I am concerned with finding my daughter." There it was. No more pretense about family friends or concerned relatives. This was a father looking for his child, and he had enough power to turn a homeless shelter upside down if necessary. I slipped out of the kitchen and positioned myself where I could see into the main hall without being easily noticed. The Sheikh stood in the center of the room like a king holding court, his entourage arranged behind him in a careful formation that spoke of years of practice. The shelter residents had been gathered in the common area, most of them looking confused and intimidated by the sudden invasion of wealth and authority. Sister Margaret stood beside the Sheikh, her face tight with the kind of controlled anger that came from having your space invaded by people who clearly believed rules didn't apply to them. "I am Sheikh Rashid al-Mansouri," he announced to the room, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "My daughter has been missing for 3 months. I have reason to believe she has been staying in this facility." He gestured, and one of his men produced the same photograph I'd seen earlier, Amira in formal dress, standing beside her father in what was clearly an official portrait. "Her name is Amira al-Mansouri. She is 16 years old and has been missing from her family since June. Anyone who has seen her or has information about her whereabouts will be generously rewarded." The amount he named made several residents gasp audibly. $50,000. Double what his advance team had offered me. I stayed hidden, my heart pounding as I watched familiar faces turn to study the photograph. These were desperate people. $50,000 represented more money than most of them had ever seen at one time. "She may have been using another name," the Sheikh continued. "She speaks both Arabic and English fluently. She may have been wearing traditional head covering or dressed to blend in with the local population." Janet, predictably, was the first to speak up. "I seen her," she said, stepping forward with the kind of confidence that came from smelling an opportunity. "That Arab girl, been here a few weeks, kept to herself mostly." The Sheikh's attention focused on Janet like a laser. "Where is she now?" "Well, that's the thing. She ain't been around for a few days, but I know who she was friendly with." Janet's eyes scanned the room until they found me. "There. That lady there, Letitia. They was always talking together, in that foreign language and everything." Every eye in the room turned toward me. The Sheikh's gaze felt like being examined under a microscope, intense, calculating, missing nothing. I stepped forward slowly, my hands visible and my posture non-threatening. There was no point in hiding anymore. "You are Mrs. Williams," the Sheikh said. It wasn't a question. His men had briefed him well. "I am." "And you spoke with my daughter." "I spoke with a young woman named Amira." "Yes." He studied me for a long moment, his dark eyes taking in my shelter clothes, my graying hair, my obviously poor circumstances. I could see him trying to understand what his daughter might have found compelling about a homeless woman old enough to be her grandmother. "Where is she?" he asked, his voice deceptively gentle. "I don't know." "Mrs. Williams?" I am not here to play games. My daughter has been missing for 3 months. I have been searching for her across 2 continents. I know she was here, and I know you helped her. The only question is whether you will tell me where she went voluntarily or whether I will need to use other methods of persuasion." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Around us, the other residents had gone completely silent, sensing that they were witnessing something far beyond their understanding. "What will you do to her when you find her?" I asked. The question seemed to surprise him. "I will take her home, where she belongs. Home to marry a man she's never met? A man old enough to be her father?" Now his eyes flashed with real anger. "You know nothing about our customs or our family's responsibilities. I know that your daughter chose to live in a homeless shelter rather than accept the life you planned for her. That tells me everything I need to know about how much she wants to go home." The room was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. Sister Margaret looked terrified, probably wondering if her shelter was about to become the site of an international incident. The Sheikh took a step closer to me, and I could smell his expensive cologne, see the fine embroidery on his robes up close. "Mrs. Williams, I am trying to be reasonable with you, but my patience has limits." "So does mine," I said, surprised by my own boldness. "Your daughter is a brave, intelligent young woman who deserves the right to choose her own future. If you really love her, you'll respect that choice." "Choose?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "She is 16 years old. Children do not choose. They obey their parents until they are old enough to understand the consequences of their decisions. She understands the consequences perfectly. That's why she ran." For a moment, I thought he might strike me. His face went dark with rage, and his hands clenched into fists. But then, unexpectedly, something else flickered across his expression. Pain, maybe. Or doubt. "You have no children," he said suddenly. The observation hit like a physical blow. "No, I don't." "Then you cannot possibly understand what it means to fear for your child's safety every moment of every day. To know that there are people who would harm her simply to hurt her family. To realize that the only way to protect her is to give her a life that she may not want, but that will keep her alive." There was something in his voice now that hadn't been there before. Not just anger or authority, but genuine anguish. This wasn't just about control or tradition. This was about a father who was terrified for his daughter's life. "Tell me about the man you want her to marry," I said quietly. His jaw tightened. "He is wealthy, powerful. His family has connections that would protect her." "And his previous wives?" The Sheikh's face went completely still. "What do you know about his previous wives?" "I know they're dead, and I know everyone suspects why, even if no one talks about it." He was quiet for a long time, and in that silence, I saw the truth. He knew. He knew exactly what kind of man he was planning to give his daughter to, and the knowledge was eating him alive. "There are things you don't understand," he said finally, his voice heavy. "Political realities, business necessities. Sometimes we must choose between bad options and worse ones. Or maybe," I said gently, "sometimes we have to choose between what's easy and what's right." He stared at me for what felt like forever. Around us, the room remained frozen, everyone sensing that something important was happening, but not understanding what. Then, to everyone's shock, the Sheikh's shoulders sagged slightly. "Where is my daughter, Mrs. Williams?" "Safe," I said. "As safe as I could make her." "That is not an answer." "It's the only answer I'm going to give you unless you can promise me that her safety and happiness matter more to you than your business arrangements." The silence stretched between us like a bridge that neither of us was sure we could cross. Finally, the Sheikh turned to address his entourage. "Everyone out," he said in Arabic. "Wait in the vehicles." His people hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with leaving him alone in what they probably saw as hostile territory. But when he repeated the command, his tone making it clear that obedience wasn't optional, they filed out quietly. When the last of his men had left, the Sheikh looked around the room at the shelter residents and Sister Margaret. "You as well," he said, though more gently. "Please. I need to speak with Mrs. Williams privately." It took a few minutes for everyone to clear out, Sister Margaret casting worried glances back at me as she ushered the last residents toward the kitchen and common areas. When we were finally alone, the Sheikh walked to one of the donated chairs and sat down heavily, suddenly looking older than his years. "She was supposed to be safe," he said quietly. "The marriage, the arrangement. It was supposed to protect her from people who want to hurt my family. But you're right about her intended husband. I know what he is." "Then why?" "Because the alternatives are worse. There are people who would kidnap her, torture her, kill her slowly just to send me a message. Business rivals who see her as the perfect way to destroy me." He looked up at me, and I saw exhaustion in his eyes. I thought I could give her a life that was constrained but safe. I never imagined she would choose danger over security. "She didn't choose danger," I said. "She chose freedom. There's a difference." "Is there?" "When freedom means living in places like this, constantly looking over her shoulder, never knowing who she can trust?" I sat down across from him, this powerful man who was discovering that all his wealth and influence couldn't solve the most important problem in his life. "Your daughter is remarkable," I told him. "She's brave, intelligent, kind. In the few weeks I knew her, she showed more strength and grace than most adults manage in a lifetime." "You speak of her in the past tense. Because I don't know if I'll ever see her again. Because I helped her disappear, and I don't regret it." He was quiet for a long time. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. A small, sad smile that transformed his entire face. "She found a protector," he said. "Even in a place like this, she found someone willing to fight for her. Perhaps that is its own kind of miracle." "What are you going to do now?" The Sheikh stood up, smoothing his robes. "I am going to make you an offer, Mrs. Williams. One that will sound impossible, but which I mean with complete sincerity." "What kind of offer?" "Come work for me. Help me find a way to keep my daughter safe without destroying her spirit. Help me bridge the gap between the life she wants and the life I can give her." I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. "I'm sorry. What?" "You protected her when you had no reason to. You risked your own safety for someone you barely knew. You spoke to her in her own language and gave her hope when she had none." He paused, studying my face. "Amira needs someone like you in her life, someone who sees her as a person, not as a piece on a chessboard. I'm a 62-year-old homeless woman with no qualifications and no connections. You have the most important qualification of all. You love my daughter." The words hung between us like a bridge I was afraid to cross. Even if I wanted to help, and I'm not saying I do, how would any of this work? Your daughter doesn't trust you. She's been running from you for 3 months. "That," he said with the first genuine smile I'd seen from him, "is where you come in. Because I have a feeling that if Mrs. Letitia Williams told my daughter that her father was ready to listen, she might be willing to hear what he has to say." Outside, I could hear the rumble of expensive engines, the sound of power waiting to be deployed. But inside this small room, something entirely different was happening. A father was learning that love sometimes meant letting go of control. And a homeless woman was discovering that sometimes the most unlikely people could offer the most extraordinary opportunities. "I need to think about this," I said. "Of course. But Mrs. Williams?" He was already moving toward the door. "Don't think too long. Every day my daughter is out there alone is another day something terrible could happen to her." As he reached the door, I called after him. "How do I even know you're telling the truth? How do I know this isn't just another way to manipulate her?" He turned back, and for a moment, I saw not a sheikh or a businessman or a powerful political figure. I saw just a father, frightened for his child. "Because," he said quietly, "if you help me bring her home safely, I will give you something more valuable than money or position. I will give you the family you never had." Then he was gone, leaving me alone with the echoes of an offer that could change everything, if I was brave enough to accept it. The phone number Sheikh Rashid had given me felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in my pocket. For 2 days, I carried it everywhere, taking it out to stare at the elegant script written on expensive cardstock. A direct line to a man who could change my life with a single conversation. All I had to do was decide whether I trusted him. On Sunday evening, I made my choice. I found a quiet corner of the shelter's common room and dialed the number. It rang once before a familiar voice answered. "Mrs. Williams, I was beginning to think you had decided against my offer." "I'm still deciding," I said, "but I have conditions." "I'm listening." "First, I want to talk to Amira, alone, before any decisions are made about her future. That can be arranged. Second, if we do this, she gets real choices. Not the illusion of choice, not manipulation disguised as options. Real freedom to choose her own path." There was a pause. "Within reason." "No, real choices. That's non-negotiable." Another pause. Longer this time. "You drive a hard bargain for someone with no leverage, Mrs. Williams. I have something you want more than money or political connections. I have your daughter's trust." He was quiet for so long I thought he'd hung up. Finally, he spoke. "Where would you like to meet with her?" "Somewhere public, somewhere she'll feel safe." "The Denver Art Museum, tomorrow at 2 o'clock. She'll be in the Contemporary American Wing." My heart leaped. "She's in Denver?" "She never left. She's been hiding in the city, moving between different safe houses. We've been tracking her movements, but we haven't approached her directly. Not until now." After I hung up, I sat for a long time thinking about what I was about to do. In less than 24 hours, I would either help reunite a father and daughter, or walk into a trap that could destroy us both. But when I thought about Amira, brave, frightened Amira, who'd chosen homelessness over helplessness, I knew I had to try. The Denver Art Museum was busy on a Monday afternoon. Families with children, tourists with cameras, college students sketching in notebooks. I found Amira exactly where the Sheikh had said she would be, standing in front of a massive painting by Georgia O'Keeffe. She looked thinner than when I'd last seen her, and there were dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and constant worry. But she was alive, and she was free, and when she saw me, her face lit up with pure joy. "Letitia!" She threw her arms around me, and for a moment neither of us spoke. We just held each other in the middle of that busy museum, two women who'd found family in the most unexpected place. "How did you find me?" she asked when we finally pulled apart. "Your father gave me this address." Her expression changed instantly, hope and fear warring in her eyes. "My father? Is he here?" "No, but he wants to see you. He wants to talk." She looked around nervously, as if expecting armed men to materialize from behind the artwork. "This is a trap, isn't it? You're working for him now." "Amira, sit down, please. Let me explain." We found a bench in a quiet corner of the gallery, and I told her everything. About the Sheikh's arrival at the shelter, about our conversation, about his offer. I didn't sugarcoat anything or try to make it sound better than it was. "He knows about my intended husband," she said when I finished. "He knows what kind of man he is, and he was still willing to hand me over." "Yes, but he also knows he was wrong, and he's asking for a chance to make it right." "What if he's lying? What if this is just another way to control me?" I took her hands in mine, feeling how cold and shaky they were. "Then we walk away." "But Amira, what if he's telling the truth? What if there's a way to have both safety and freedom?" She was quiet for a long time, staring at the O'Keeffe painting as if it held answers to impossible questions. "I'm tired," she said finally. "I'm so tired of running, of hiding, of being afraid every time someone looks at me twice. But I'm even more afraid of going back to that life." What if it didn't have to be that life? What if there was a third option? Like what? Like having a family that protects you without controlling you. Like having choices that matter. Like having someone in your corner who understands both worlds. She looked at me sharply. You're talking about yourself. I'm talking about us. If you want to try this, you won't be doing it alone. We talked for another hour, walking through the museum galleries as we worked through possibilities and fears. Finally, as the afternoon shadows grew longer, Amira made her decision. I'll see him, she said, but not alone, and not at his hotel or anywhere he controls, somewhere neutral. I called the Sheikh from the museum's cafe. She'll meet you, but it has to be on her terms. What terms? Tomorrow evening, the Interfaith Chapel at the University of Colorado Hospital, 7 o'clock. She chooses that location because it's sacred to multiple traditions and because hospitals represent healing, not conflict. And you'll be there? If she wants me to be. She will, he said with certainty that surprised me. She trusts you more than she trusts me. Perhaps more than she trusts anyone. The chapel was small and simple, with plain wooden pews and windows that let in the soft light of evening. I arrived first, followed a few minutes later by Amira, who looked nervous but determined in a simple blue dress I'd never seen before. New clothes? I asked. I thought I should look presentable, like someone worth negotiating with. The Sheikh arrived precisely at 7, alone as promised. He wore a Western business suit instead of traditional robes, and his usually perfect composure showed cracks of uncertainty. Father and daughter faced each other across the small chapel like diplomats from warring countries. I sat in the back pew, close enough to intervene if necessary, but far enough away to give them space. Amira, the Sheikh said, and her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. Baba. The Arabic word for father came out as a whisper. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, the Sheikh held out his hands, palms up, in a gesture of surrender. I have made mistakes, he said in Arabic, then repeated it in English. Terrible mistakes. I thought I was protecting you, but I was destroying you instead. Amira's composure cracked slightly. You were going to give me to a murderer. Yes, because I was more afraid of losing you to violence than losing you to unhappiness. I was wrong. How do I know you won't change your mind again? How do I know this isn't just another form of control? The Sheikh looked toward me, and I saw a question in his eyes. I nodded slightly. Because Mrs. Williams has agreed to be your advocate, he said. Whatever decisions we make about your future, she will be there to ensure your voice is heard and your choices are respected. Amira turned to stare at me. You're really going to work for him? I'm going to work for you, I corrected, to help you build a bridge between the life you want and the family you love. Even if that means standing up to him when he's wrong? Especially then. The Sheikh smiled ruefully. I suspect Mrs. Williams will have many occasions to remind me of this conversation. What followed was the most honest conversation between a father and daughter that I'd ever witnessed. They talked about expectations and traditions, about safety and freedom, about the difference between protection and control. There were tears, raised voices, long silences, and moments of unexpected laughter. By the time the chapel's evening service was scheduled to begin, they had reached an understanding. Amira would come home, but to a house of her own choosing with security she helped design. She would continue her education, but at universities that offered programs she wanted to study. When she was ready to marry, if she was ever ready, it would be to someone she chose, not someone chosen for her. And I would be there to help navigate the space between traditional expectations and modern realities, not as an employee, but as family. There's one more thing, the Sheikh said as we prepared to leave. Mrs. Williams, I meant what I said about giving you a family, if you're willing to accept it. 6 months later, I stood in the garden of a beautiful house in Cherry Hills Village, Watching Amira practice driving with the patience of a professional instructor who was getting paid far more than he was worth to teach a sheikh's daughter the fundamentals of parallel parking. The house was mine, a gift from a grateful father who'd discovered that sometimes the best way to protect someone you love is to give them the tools to protect themselves. It had 4 bedrooms, a kitchen that looked like something from a magazine, and a garden where I grew herbs and vegetables that reminded me of places I'd lived long ago. Marcus had tried to contact me once, after news of my employment with an international businessman had somehow made it back to his social circle. I'd declined his invitation to coffee and blocked his number. Some doors once closed should stay that way. Amira was enrolled at the University of Denver, studying international relations and business, with an eye toward eventually taking over some of her father's legitimate enterprises. She was also dating a young man from her comparative literature class, a development that had given her father multiple sleepless nights until he met the boy and discovered he was both intelligent and genuinely kind. "He's a philosophy major," Amira had told me with a grin. "Baba doesn't know what to do with that." "Give him time," I'd advised. "He's learning that love isn't about control." The sheikh visited monthly, staying in the guest room and pretending not to supervise Amira's choices, while actually supervising them very carefully. It was progress. Slow progress, but progress nonetheless. As for me, I'd found something I'd never expected at 62 years old: purpose. Not just the purpose of helping one remarkable girl navigate between 2 worlds, but the purpose of building something real and lasting from the wreckage of my old life. I wasn't the same woman who'd been thrown away by her husband for being too ugly for his new life. I wasn't even the same woman who'd huddled in a shelter bed wondering if survival was worth the effort. I was someone's family, someone's protector, someone's bridge between the life they'd been given and the life they were choosing to build. That evening, after Amira had successfully parallel parked between 2 traffic cones and celebrated with the kind of exuberant joy that only 18-year-olds could muster, we sat on the back porch watching the sunset paint the mountains pink and gold. "Do you ever miss your old life?" she asked me. I thought about it seriously. I miss some things. The illusion of security. The simplicity of not having to make important decisions that affect other people's futures. But I wouldn't go back. That woman who paid for her husband's education and got nothing in return but rejection? She was generous and loyal, but she was also invisible. Even to herself. And now? Now I matter. Not because of what I can give people, but because of who I am. Because of the choices I make and the love I offer freely. Amira leaned against my shoulder, and I was reminded again of how much she'd grown in the past 6 months. Not just physically, but emotionally. The frightened girl hiding in a homeless shelter had become a confident young woman ready to take on the world. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For everything. For protecting me. For believing in me. For helping me find my way home." "Thank you," I replied, "for showing me that sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you're born into." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, I realized that my story hadn't ended with rejection and loss. It had begun there. Everything that came before, the marriage, the sacrifice, the heartbreak, had been preparation for this moment, this life, this unexpected gift of belonging. At 62, I'd learned that it's never too late to start over. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, starting over means finding exactly where you were meant to be all along. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.